Hello and welcome to Push Your Glasses Up. I'm Mikey. Today we are joined by Spencer Perry to finally finish out this Halloween saga with Halloween Ends. I know it took a while to get here, but listen, Halloween can happen at any time of year. That's what's great about it. Just a reminder, hey, if you enjoy the videos on this channel, the podcast, the trailer reactions, whatnot, please like and subscribe to this very here YouTube channel. It helps me out a great deal. If you prefer these podcasts in audio form, go find Push Your Glasses Up on whatever podcast service you enjoy, because we're on most of them, probably. The big ones, at least, for sure. Let's talk about Michael Myers-ish. Spencer, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. I have you here for two things normally, which is Michael Myers and aeroplanes. So it's the most wonderful time of year. So let's talk about Halloween. What did you
time to think about it?
Yeah. What did you overall think of Halloween Ends?
I remember the first time I saw it, I came away not thinking it was the train wreck that so many others immediately labeled it as. But there were also plenty of things about it that I was like, that's stupid.
Yeah.
So it's a weird movie in the sense that I don't know that it necessarily fits tonally with the two movies that preceded it. But I'm also 13 movies into a slasher franchise, I'm not mad about a movie doing something weird and ambitious, even if it doesn't work. And I think the thing we learned is that a lot of Halloween fans would rather have the same thing again and again and again and again and again.
Yeah. I'm somewhere in between that mentality and your mentality, where I think that it does some interesting stuff, but I think it's a better movie without the Halloween IP attached to it. I think it's an interesting thriller that, romantic thriller or whatever you want to call it. But I think that the devotion to making references to Season of the Witch, with the opening titles and stuff like that, and trying to really say well, this is a different one, is too structurally important to this movie to make it work as a Halloween movie, which is a bummer. But it's also doing that stuff, I think it does that stuff well. So it's really strange to be in this position of it's not a great Halloween movie, but it is actually a pretty good other thing. And it's just a very strange place to sit with this, because it does tonally fall somewhere between 2018 and Kills. I would say tonally it's actually closer to 2018 than Kills. It doesn't have as much of the camp stuff as Kills had. And I mean, it does have camp stuff, just in a different way. With the I think it's more unintentional camp, as with really hackneyed plot ideas of how people fall in love and stuff like that, where it's just these characters are immediately in love. They're it's not like they're teenagers, young love kind of thing. They're in their 20s. It's not because what is the time jump? It's a year. The beginning of this movie is a year after Kills.
Yeah, and then it's 3 years after that.
Yeah, so he's 21 in the intro, so he's 24.
Is he? I thought he was still a high school senior, because they talk about him going to college.
I guess maybe, but doesn't he specifically say, I'm 21, I don't get scared?
Oh, he might. I don't remember.
I think when they're talking, the little shit of a kid, and here talking, which that intro is a good intro. I like that intro. But the conversation they're having while they're watching The Thing is that like it's okay if you're scared, and then the kid's like, I'm not scared, you're scared, and then he says like I'm either 20 or 21. So like maybe it's this weird like undetailed like I'm transferring to another program or something like that.
But, maybe.
Yeah. But yeah, let's say we can go full spoilers now. The way that kid dies in that intro. Ooh.
I mean, it's funny because they do the the smart filmmaking thing of giving you all the pieces and clues about what is about to happen, but they still manage to make it shocking, even though as an audience member you can pick up on what they're putting down and see where it's headed. So as soon as the parents open the door and then just the body,
the bounce. Yeah. Oh my god. Just a water balloon falling down the stairs.
Well, it's such a wild opening. Also because it they're planting seeds about Myers and his place in this a year later from Kills, but then they're also playing with the audience in the sense that they're putting all these things in the frame and making references to maybe he is in the house, maybe he is back, and then they immediately flip it, obviously, to be like, no, he's not here. It's just this guy, and his whole deal is going to be the through line for this movie.
Yeah, it's a little bit strange because of that. Like that is for sure the setup, and then it's like, is that the right way for it to go? Right. Because like, yeah, there has been like Season of the Witch movies where Michael Myers is in it very little or not at all, and I don't know if when you're setting it up as the finale of this new trilogy that has been all about Laurie and Michael, like there's tangential metaphors and characters in these movies, but like this movie doesn't do a satisfying job of like fulfilling that setup. Even it doesn't matter that like Kills, for me was fairly lower than 2018. You could still remedy that and like sew up those missing parts that it would just be more fulfilling as a story coming forward. And I wish that this movie was able to do more of that, but like it's I don't know if I've ever seen a franchise like that's had like the same. I mean, there's varying co-writers on it, but like the core structure of the creative team has been there the entire time. And like, I don't know if I've seen a franchise do this before, where it's like starts out with this like huge impact at the beginning, and then like juggles all these different vibes through the rest of the trilogy before. Like, it's very strange. It's like, yeah, you have that a little bit with other trilogies or franchises or whatever, but usually that's because like a director change or a writer change. It's like, nah, they were there this whole time and made this decision. And that
is one thing that kind of makes this movie interesting and this trilogy interesting, is because now David Gordon Green is technically the one guy who has made the most Halloween movies, just because Rob Zombie and Rick Rosenthal have each made 2.
Yeah.
Now he has made 3, so he has made the most Halloween movies. So it is interesting from the perspective of like having one person's voice guide it, even if he's like, instead of like, you think he's going to go left, he goes right. You think he's going to go left, and he goes backwards.
Yeah. That is a very good analogy. Yeah, I'm disappointed with how it came out. Like, I'm not upset with it because it's like, whatever. Who cares? I'm not gonna.
Like, what can we be mad about?
all I have to worry about is now there's only 2 Halloween movies I like have to revisit. But that's where I'm at with this franchise, and it's like, yeah, it would be great if there was a more or a stronger want to like revisit the way I revisit like a Star Wars trilogy or whatever. But like at this point, I'm like, you know what? There's two good ones, and the second one ends in a way that is like there's a finite like ending in that movie in a way where it's just like, yeah, it teases a little bit of like, don't go to the house, let it burn, blah blah blah, but like it's finite enough where it's like that could be the end of Michael Myers, and I'm like,
Sure.
Cool. There's a weird legacy gap between the two, but like it's a fulfilling 1 and 2 story that way, so I'm like, cool, bookends. It's fine.
Yeah, I do think that it's interesting though that this movie seems to be borrowing way more from John Carpenter's Christine than it is John Carpenter's Halloween.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, in the sense that, you know, oh shit, what is his name?
Corey
Campbell. Is it Campbell?
I don't remember the last name, but
it's an alliterative.
It might be Cunningham.
That's it, Corey Cunningham. It's the same name as the kid from Christine, and it's, you know, it's that similar dynamic that he has with the car, that he has
with the motorcycle,
with Michael Myers, and it not necessarily like, you know, there's a tinge of eroticism in Christine, and obviously none of that is present here, but it's such a it's just so bizarre, you know, in the larger Halloween franchise sense. So but to that end, it's the kind of movie that when people tell me they hate it, I say I get it, and when people tell me they love it because it's so interesting and weird and unique, I say I get it. But I still find myself wrestling with like, there's things I really like about it, and then there's things about it that I think are really dumb. Specifically, like, not to jump all over the place, but you know, the movie really goes out of its way to have Corey sort of seemingly like take a piece of Michael's evil, maybe absorb a piece of his evil, and use that to start his own killing spree, and maybe reignite the legend of Michael in a way, because people obviously don't know it's him. And then, but then the movie, because this movie is a trilogy capper and sort of like, you know, the last time that Jamie Lee Curtis will ever play the role, they have to have a big fight between the two, between Michael and Laurie Strode one last time. So in that sense, the movie, that part of the movie feels incredibly tacked on because it's what people expected. Even though you just made a movie, you know, the first 90 minutes of the movie is subverting every expectation that everyone has for what this film will be and what this ending of the series will be. And so I find it really interesting and fun to watch, really up until that last 15 minutes, in part because it feels tacked on and it feels like, well, this is what people want, but then also because I feel like it kind of stoops to these really ridiculous online arguments about slasher characters and monsters in a way of like, oh, well, if you just put them in a wood chipper, then they can't come back. And then that's what they end up doing. And it's, I get that they see that, you know, the shredder thing, the industrial shredder throughout the whole movie, but it's still such a ridiculous, not to mention the parade of everyone in Haddonfield wakes up at midnight to watch the procession.
That's okay. The main theme of this movie is supposed to be cancel culture bad. And then the end of the movie is, nah, cancel culture is actually good. Which, first of all, let me just clarify, cancel culture, not a thing. But like this, the fact that like that they went with that theme in the first place and then betrayed their own theme with the very end of it by having the entire town parade through with Michael Myers tied to the roof of the car and then get carried by the crowd like it's that train scene in Spider-Man 2. Like, what is going on?
Yeah, it's very bizarre. And to me, I wonder if the movie had an alternate ending and that this was like reshoots.
Oh, I believe there was a ton of reshoots on this movie because originally this was supposed to be filmed back to back with kills, wasn't it?
Right.
And so I think that they probably had some stuff in the can, and then like during COVID had to rework everything so that they could figure out ways to shoot people together in the room at the same time. Because like it is so disjointed, and like that, I feel like the multiple year time jump probably wasn't the main sort of device in the movie beforehand, just because the way it plays out, it doesn't seem like that was always planned out.
Right. Yeah. But it's odd because I feel like David Gordon Green probably got an incredibly long leash because of the success of 2018. You know, it's the highest grossing slasher movie of all time. So I bet he got the benefit of the doubt more than anything from the studio about whatever you want to do.
Well, it's also Blumhouse, and they tend to let people go a little further, but this has that universal IP attached to it, so it's you would think that there would be a little more interjection going on typically, but
I feel like we're going to have to wait like 5 to 10 years to get like the dirt of what happened, in the development and then post production of this movie, because I would bet so much money that he had to have had a different ending in mind, and then was told like you have to have a Michael Laurie fight, and you have to like, especially with the way that studios and Blumhouse especially are like obsessed with the franchisability of their movies. Like it is surprising that he would be allowed to like destroy Michael Myers' body to turn him into pudding. So,
well,
I'm anxious to see what conversations happen behind closed doors.
Yeah, I do think that they did like go out of their way to be like, this is the last Blumhouse one. This is the last Blumhouse one. So I think that the possibility of Michael Myers being like finished, like at least this version of Michael Myers being finished with this one, could have always been a plausible outcome. Like even with all that stuff you were saying about like the franchisability and stuff, but like it's just I think that all of those things could have been satisfying in the end, but like when like you were saying before, when the entire movie is subverting the idea of a movie that caps off a trilogy, you can't use those same devices anymore. Like you just can't. And I think it just straight up would have been a little bit more in tone with the plot of the first two movies of this trilogy to say that, because they almost set it up as Laurie would become a mentor to him, like, and he would have that sort of like, hey, which mentor do I choose?
Yeah.
And I think that would have probably played out a little bit better, because like Corey could have had that turn at the end where he just goes, oh, I fucked up.
Mm-hmm.
And like at least had that little bit of redemption in the end where it's just like, no, we just have him lying on the floor and he kills himself because we need to get to Michael. Like, and it's one of those things where I'm like, man, you could have just had him get killed by Michael and like repent his sins on his deathbed and just like be like, here's a little bit of like comeuppance for a character who knows he screwed up. Like that's a little bit more satisfying. And it's just like at the rate that this movie wound up going, it's just like it wasn't a slog, but it was a slow burn to like go through a lot of this movie. And then the final like kill streak part of it is just like, we're done. Like it's I don't understand how that worked out either, because it was just like you're setting up this relationship between Corey and Allison for 80% of the movie, and then like and that's almost the entirety of content in the first most of this movie, and then it's just like an ending that happens, and it's rushed through, and it's just these things that like, it's like somebody made two different puzzles and was just like trying to fit them together in a way, because it was just like, there's two movies in here and I don't understand like how you manage to like dedicate yourself to one thing and not notice that.
Right. Well, and it's worth noting that in the lead up to the release of the movie, David Gordon Green sort of spoke about how they wrote it. So there's 4 credited writers on the movie, which when I first saw the movie, that card came up in the credits, and I was like, oh boy.
That's not going to be a good thing. Yeah.
And so it's David Gordon Green and Danny McBride and then 2 other guys. And Green said that in interviews that what they would do is, a scene would
one word at a time and then pass it on.
Almost, because they would get to the start of a scene, and all 4 of them would go write their own version of the scene and then come back and pick their favorite of the 4. And it does feel like a movie where they picked different. Someone else wrote each successive scene.
Yeah.
And sometimes I feel like that is no more clear than in the characterization of Laurie, because I'm willing to accept the fact that this far removed from the events of 2018 Halloween, the character having gone to therapy, having sobered up, having made peace with everything that's happened, is different and has a different outlook on life than she has in the previous movies. It happens very quickly because it all happens off screen. But then the fact that you have this character that is very homely and a little more down to earth, have a scene where she's like, you have to rip open your shirt and show Grief your tits.
Yeah.
And it's stuff like, there's just lines where you're like, was the camera rolling and Jamie Lee Curtis was just talking and then they put it into the movie? Like, what's going on?
Well, like, and that's the thing. There's those dialogue scenes like that, but then there's also like the tonal scenes where it's just like, why is she in the house where Corey killed the person, like sitting in a chair, hitting it against the wall? Like, she's not that person for the rest of the movie. If she was still 2018,
yes,
I think it fits, but like, they've gone out of their way to say she's not that anymore.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think some of the stuff that they're doing with Laurie is interesting conceptually, and it just wasn't executed all that well, which, the way that you were just saying they wrote it explains a lot of it. But yeah, I something about this whole movie though, like, stems from, and I know it's stupid to like cut to the core of something and then just be like, but that's not like a decision could be made that would, like, cell phones ruin every movie, like, that kind of thing. So Laurie had all this money to buy a house. Why did she buy a house in Haddonfield? Like, she buys like a fucking mansion in Haddonfield. Like, what is going on? Why wouldn't she leave? That is something that, like, no matter how tied to your trauma you are, if you have, like, I don't know, is it the insurance money from the bunker house? Is that what it is? Because, like, if you have all that money to buy a very big, very nice house, why are you there? Like, and I don't want to say, like, yes, this is true that, like, not everybody has the means to get out of their situations, all that stuff, when you think about like real domestic like situations like that. But nobody in this town that has these like big traumas happening in this like version of the movies anyway, like, Laurie could have bought a house elsewhere. The parents of that Jeremy kid at the beginning could have bought a house elsewhere. Like, that family had a 5-story house. Like, what? But like, it's just, I don't understand showcasing that these people all have a ton of money.
Yeah.
And listen, like, I'm saying this from the perspective of a very sad situation that happened in my childhood growing up. Of one of my best friends lost his older brother when his older brother was in high school, and before the year was over, they had moved like an hour away.
Yeah,
that is just a realistic thing that happens, and nobody in this town does that. I don't understand.
Well, perhaps it leans into the theme that paranoia has really overtaken the people of Haddonfield, and the idea that this paranoia that everyone harbors has sort of rotted everything about the town, which is an idea that I feel like you hear them talk about in interviews, and you're like, oh yeah, I see it a little bit in the movie, but this, don't act like this is a major theme of the movie, because it's only present in a handful of sequences. But I think that might be leaning into that theme of the movie, just that, you know, this town is kind of rotten to the core because of everything Michael has done, but then the way that the town responded because of it, but then building on that, the paranoia of it happening again. I think that you could argue that maybe that's why no one apparently leaves Haddonfield until the end of the movie, because then that's also sort of the cathartic final moment for Allison of the, you are now leaving Haddonfield, which is funny because that you see that scene in the movie and you're like, I don't think cities really do that anymore. I remember being a kid and there used to be "You are now leaving" signs, but I don't think they really do that anymore, do they?
Well, I have lived in Massachusetts my entire life, and the only version of that sign is an entering sign.
Sure.
There's no leaving signs
and it's
anywhere.
Not on the back of it is the leaving sign either.
Yeah, like I've never once seen a leaving sign, because we don't even have like that style of entering sign where it's like the greeting card cursive font kind of thing. You get that with like when you change state lines or whatever, with like going to Maine or something like that, but like all of ours are just big white signs that say entering such and such town, and it has like the stamp of Massachusetts logo on it, and it's that logo is also racist. That's not good. But yeah, it's a very peculiar thing. But yeah, it's I'm with you on the idea that like those concepts are like in there a little bit, but it's such a small percentage of this movie that says that like the town is rotted that way, because like 90% of the time everyone is very cavalier about Michael Myers. And like the way it starts is a year after the events of 2018. And the mom of that brat kid is just like, Michael Myers. Like, what? I don't understand. Like, how there's like trying to sell that aspect of it while also having the characters be like that confrontationally cavalier about things, where it's like, no, it's not. It like literally all of this stuff probably stems back to that way that they wrote it, with like handing things off to different people, because it's like you do that and then do a final draft. You don't just like piece things in like that. But it's there's things about this movie that I think work, but like you just need to tweak it a little bit and be like, okay, if that's how the town is, then have some of these characters leave town, and then you have the spirit of Michael Myers chase them. Like, it doesn't have to. You could have them come back and have the final confrontation in Haddonfield. Like, oh, we need to go back because that's where it all happened. Okay, that's totally fine. You could have started this movie with them an hour away. Allison and Laurie live in Chicago now, and they need to come back to the small town and get all that stuff done. And I think it could have probably worked a little bit better that way, just for the sake of like, there's nothing that like is making it inherently about Haddonfield until that parade at the end, right? Like there's not really anything saying that it has to be like yeah, they're trying to do the cancel culture thing where everyone is like, that's what's confusing about me about that too, is like, they're trying to say cancel culture bad through this whole thing, but what they're actually doing is a lot of like victim blaming shit, which is like really fucked up. Like, that's the actual fucked up thing. So like, to frame it as the other thing when like that actually could have been a genuinely solid plot device that they went with, like that scene, that grocery store scene, going from like Laurie is actually like having a moment of happiness. And then she comes out and gets confronted by the family member of another victim, and like that stuff actually worked for me.
Yeah.
But it was in the midst of like, okay, well, the town is blaming everybody that isn't Michael Myers. And it's like, you lose control of the message when you do the whole like, if everybody's a super, then nobody's a super. Like, you can't just shove that on everybody and then expect it to be meaningful for one person. It just doesn't work that well for me. And that's like the biggest bummer about this movie to me, is like, there are little pieces, there are little nuggets that like come through that would work. And it's just kind of like this hodgepodge of different scenes that go together, and the disparate nature of the two movies that they made at the same time. But yeah.
Well, and this is something that I've thought about, and I'm curious to get your perspective, is, would this movie have worked more if Corey had been a character from the first 2018 movie? If his presence had been threaded throughout Halloween 2018 and Halloween Kills into being a big part of Ends. Like, maybe he only appears in a handful of scenes in the first one and Kills, but then, you know, everything about his story, I think, maybe gets more power if we know who he is to start.
Right.
And,
I do think that would probably work better. You set up that he's like a kid who had a very unfortunately gruesome thing happen before 2018. Like, it's in the backstory to him as a side character in 2018. And then you go through and like, this is the culmination of like the fact that there's now, like, we actually see the years of built up like society crushing him down kind of thing. And I think that would have worked a little bit better. I appreciate that they did the, like, I think we talked about this on Kills, where like in Kills, they started to lean into the supernatural stuff and didn't go full on it, but like teased towards it. And then they sort of went hard with it in this one, with the passing of the baton, I guess.
sure.
But like, I don't know if that's detrimental or just indifference. I know I don't think it's like it came out as a truly positive aspect of this movie. But like, it could have been a positive aspect of this movie if they decided to do the two mentor thing kind of. And Corey had to make a choice, because at no point in this movie does he make a choice. He's just suddenly like, he's just this like dorky guy who then becomes a sad dorky guy, and then suddenly he's James Dean, and that's his whole thing. He's James Dean who suddenly starts murdering people, and like, I don't care. Like, I just don't care about him. And that's, you need, like, if you're gonna make me go on this trip that is like at least a little unfathomable in terms of like passing the torch of a psychopath's mentality into another person, sure, then you need to at least make me care about the person that's happening to. And that's like, I just didn't the entire time. So it, like, I had no investment in whether or not something good happened to Corey in the end, because like,
sure,
who cares at that point?
Yeah. I do want to ask though, did you have the same split second moment in your brain when you were watching where they had the scene where Michael and Corey kill the doctor and the head nurse, and then as soon as that scene is over, it cuts to Corey on his motorcycle with someone on the back of the motorcycle with him.
Is Michael Myers on the back of the motorcycle?
The previous scene is the two of them, and then it immediately cuts to him on his motorcycle with someone else. There was half a second where I was like, is Michael Myers on the back of a motorcycle right now?
Suddenly Michael Myers is much cooler of a guy.
Yeah.
That would be unbelievable. Like, the way that, like, those videos are online of, like, somebody pulls up to a motorcycle and then somebody has, like, a dog with them.
Yeah.
And then there's, like, another twist of, like, the dog has a helmet and sunglasses on. So that's the way that scene should work. Yes, absolutely. Yeah.
So you didn't have that problem?
I didn't, but I'm glad I do now.
It was just funny because when we saw it in the theater, I think it was us, and there might have been like a group of 4 people because we went early in the morning. But when that moment happened, Carly and I both turned to each other and we were like, "Is Michael on the back of that motorcycle?" And both like started. You have to do that thing where you're like laughing really hard, but you're trying to be quiet.
Oh, stifling a laugh. Yeah, that is.
Yeah, not only is the scene quiet, but like the audience is quiet. So like you can't let everyone know that like you're losing your mind laughing about something. But it's, man, that is one of my favorite moments in the movie, and it's not for the reason that they would want it to be one of your favorite moments.
Right, and that's sort of like, I have this thing with this movie where I'm like, I kind of wish I got to see the movie they were making that isn't Halloween. Like, I want to, like, what was that movie with Emma Roberts and I think Dave Franco that was like, they were playing that internet game and then like it just kept elevating, you have to do like a bigger dare or something. Like,
Sure,
it felt like that. I'm like, you know what, I could actually watch that version of this movie, but like injecting it with Michael Myers, who, like, and I wanted to say this earlier and totally forgot, the thing that people have about Godzilla movies that you and I disagree with, which is like, why is Godzilla not in this movie more?
Yeah.
That's how I feel about this movie. Michael Myers is in this movie for like 6 minutes, and his kill count is smaller than Corey's accidental kill count.
Yeah.
Corey kills more people by mistake and circumstance of the moment than Michael Myers goes out of his way to kill people for. And it's like, I am watching this movie for character development, but you're not giving me that. So you need to at least give me the other thing. And yeah, it's just a very bizarre movie in the end, because like, they put in the thing that fans should want, which is a final confrontation with Laurie and Michael, but it doesn't,
and like a definitive sort of like death.
Yeah.
Not only in terms of like the shredding thing, but like the way he sort of gets crucified to the table. It's a very like, well, if I was fighting a slasher, I would do this.
Yeah. And that should be rewarding either way, because like we've just built to it for years and years and years and decades. But because they made this movie that's not about Michael Myers in most ways, it's unsatisfying. And the aspect of it that is frustrating about that is like, somebody knew they had to do that, because the way that they set it up, which is like, that is actually the right decision. Like, as hokey and expected as it is, that's the right decision in a threequel that like is actually the 4th movie. But like, in this setup of like, we're capping off this franchise and we have set up these two characters being opposing forces for decades, like, you have to have that confrontation. But then the decision to make a movie that has one of those characters, almost not in the movie entirely, is just frustrating. And it's like any satisfaction that I was genuinely, I think the version of that confrontation, of that fight between Laurie and Michael, is more exciting in the trailer than it is in the movie. And that is the problem. That is like a huge problem. And that all comes down to like, there was no other context to the trailer. The context in the trailer is, holy crap, we're going to see them go one last time, and we know how it's going to go, but like, it's still going to feel right. And that's the thing, is like this movie, like most of it just doesn't feel right. Like a lot of it can be fine, and a lot of it, but like the DJ kill is fantastic. But like, it's just some of these things that are more frustrating with like that setup and completion of that story, the delivery of, like I said it earlier, but like you can tell men wrote the romance stuff because like these people are instantly in love. Like they don't know each other's names and they're instantly in love. And they're like, there is an interesting story in there. Like that meet cute aspect of it is interesting. It's just not done very well. And then like the correlation of how Allison like suddenly flips to like worrying about Laurie again, which is like, how did she connect the radio tower being on fire to being like, oh no, Corey's actually bad? Like, she didn't know that he did that. But that's, there's just these correlation things where I'm like, there's something in here, but you guys like reached into a bag and just, you picked out the wrong thing and didn't win the prize. Like it's more frustrating than anything, where I'm just like, I just wish it was more satisfying. And that's it. Cause like we're at a point in modern cinema where it's like, sometimes the expected thing is the right thing. And we can't subvert everything. I think subversion works best in the middle. And they did that with Kills, to however result you want to choose from that. But like, when you're wrapping up a story, there's a reason the hero's journey is like the definitive kind of structure of storytelling, because it's like, it just feels better. It just feels more satisfying and fulfilling. And they didn't do that. Yeah.
It's funny because on Halloween, I decided I'm gonna do the marathon idea I had before, which was Halloween 1978, Halloween 2018, Halloween Kills, Halloween Ends. And I came away from watching all four movies back to back, thinking a little less of Kills, because I was like, you can really feel how this is like a postscript to the 2018 movie when you watch it right after the 2018 movie, where so much of it feels like deleted scenes that have been put into a movie. And I sort of came away feeling like enjoying Ends a little more in that context. And I think part of it is because like you're sitting on the couch for 6 hours watching all four Halloween movies. But by the time you get to Ends, I sort of had this feeling of I had been on the journey, and it was like you had been watching it all unfold, and also knowing, how Ends plays out, and having a better understanding of its narrative and how it fits into the larger scheme. And I won't say that watching it with all the other films makes it more satisfying, but I think you can kind of see the threads it has that connects it to 78, to 2018, and to Kills a little better.
It's like they used a different color thread to sew it together.
Sure, yeah. It's it was an odd marathon because it was something I had, I'm not alone in thinking of trying that experiment, but I wonder how many people would even be curious to do it now since the reception to Ends was so poor. But to your point, it doesn't feel like an ending that they're set that really carries through all the way, but it is interesting to see the way that it connects to the other movies in weird and fun ways.
Yeah, it has those themes that connect it together. It just wasn't necessarily executed in a way that worked out as it could have in the end, because like it's a very, very, very strong start with 2018, and then it's sort of like I think it's weird. I think I like Kills as a watchability thing more than this, but I think I like this as far as the vibes feel a little bit more like 2018 kind of thing. And so I'm caught in the middle, and they kind of balance each other out a little bit, where I don't think either of them is very strong, but they're both pretty much on par for different reasons of like just not quite hitting. And yeah, I think I'd be more inclined if I was to revisit any of or either of these two to go with Kills, just because it's a little more fun.
Sure.
But yeah, it's I said this at the beginning. I'm at the point where I'm like, there's 2 Halloween movies for me. That's fine. Or like I'll revisit like H2O or Resurrection at any given time for shits and giggles. But like in terms of like the saga, like my personal Halloween saga is basically 2 movies. So I'm good. Wiping them.
It's a franchise that I really love, and like even the bad ones I could watch, except for maybe Resurrection. I don't know, that I have no strong.
Well, it's a group watch kind of thing where you're just like, we're gonna watch this very bad movie.
But like if 4 is on, I'll watch 4. You know, if H2O is on, I'll watch H2O, even though it's like 75 minutes long and basically a live action Looney Tunes.
Yeah.
But I'll watch the Rob Zombie ones. They're fun. But like, 78, Season of the Witch, and 18 are the ones that, that's high water mark.
In Season of the Witch, like, I say there's 2 Halloween movies. I think of that because I'm not even thinking of Season of the Witch as a Halloween movie, because it's what Carpenter wanted to do, which is just make it a different thing. But yeah, I think once you're 44 years in, you can't really go too hard in that kind of decision, and otherwise you end up with Halloween Ends.
Which is why whatever the next movie ends up being will probably be another hard pivot back to just traditional slasher movie.
Yeah, and at this point you have to expect it's probably another reboot, like no more Legacy. That's going to be tied to just this trilogy, and so hopefully it'll be at least 10 years though. I think I'm good for a while.
The 50th anniversary is in 2028. And I would be stunned if they didn't have something ready for that year. Yeah,
that does make sense. I mean, Universal loves their anniversaries, so maybe they'll just re-release the way they did with Jurassic Park on their 20th anniversary and just put the original one in 3D. That's all it is. It'd be the most ridiculous use of 3D conversion ever, but sure.
What's so interesting is that the cinematography of the original Halloween is so good. And even if you know how little money they had for it, it just makes it more impressive. But it is such an immersive depth of field in that movie that, like, it could be cool in 3D.
It would work. I just don't think it would have the like oomph of like it's since it's not filmed for it. It doesn't have the like going towards camera stuff, which is like hokey when overused, but like you need a little bit of, but like it's whereas Jurassic Park, it had both the depth of field with like grass in the foreground and stuff in the background, but like there were shots of like the raptor jumping up to the vent and stuff. So like,
yeah,
that is one of my favorite usage of 3D ever, is that version of that movie, which is crazy. I don't love 3D. I will be seeing Avatar: The Way of Water in 3D because it feels like you have to.
Why?
But
Wait to see it.
yeah, but yeah, it's one of those things where I'm just like, I'd be okay if they just re-released the first movie for that anniversary. I would be totally fine waiting a decent amount of time before another Halloween happens. But you are probably correct in that it is Universal, so we'll probably get a restart sooner rather than later. Cool, man. Well, I'm very glad that we were able to complete this saga. No matter.
It's over.
Yeah. Evil died tonight. Or a couple months ago, because it's December. But yeah, thanks again for coming on, bud.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. Anytime. Of
course. We'll figure out the next theme to get you back on the show. We had Psychopath, we had Airplanes, I don't know, a sub that also like is sentient and kills. We'll do Ghost Ship. And then, yeah. Cool, man. Well, thanks again, and bye.